What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talker. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they are off and running. On Friday, I asked at least for, hey, maybe a tight end. Mark Andrews would have been great, but, Donald Parham is good enough. The Pittsburgh Steelers make their first signing of the offseason. Things have just started, and to be honest, there is much more to come. We're going to dive into Donnie. We're going to dive into what's next, a potential trade for George Pickens that I think warrants a little conversation. I'm headed to the NFL Combine later this afternoon with the rest of the Pittsburgh Steelers media, scouts, coaches, and probably Omar Khan himself. So I'm giving you guys my draft projection heading in to the NFL Combine and 5 players that you as Pittsburgh Steelers fans need to be watching very closely in Indianapolis. Nick, it is a beautiful one here for the drive to good old Indy. 6 hours in a car by myself. I'll tell you this. Everybody asks, are you a podcast guy? Are you a music guy? I may go until I can't take it anymore, and then I switch guy. I start with a book because you got to be productive. But right now I'm listening to The Women, which is about the nurses of Vietnam. And when I tell you it's messed up, man. It's so you can only go about an hour and a half before you're like, all right, dude, I got to, this is not what I was expecting, but I promised myself I'll finish the book. Then you go to a nice, easy podcast. And then once you're sick and tired, or you realize I haven't paid attention to this in 20 minutes, you turn on some tunes and you finish the drive. I'm excited. I'm excited to get to Indy. Good food, good people, a lot of conversation to be had, a lot of players to watch. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling excited and ready for you to send me a picture to make me very jealous of you at St. Elmo's, because I know that is like the seminal moment for you every year when you get to Indianapolis. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for you. I'm excited to have you talk to a lot of these draft prospects and kind of in coordination be able to see what they have to say and kind of get a little bit more of an idea of how some of these guys are. But first and foremost, we all know that they say what possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, speculation is 9/10 of the offseason. Thankfully, we have that 10th position here where the Steelers actually did something we get to talk about. So I'm excited about that.
I am very excited. I'm also, just like you said, excited for some 10 p.m. steak at St. Elmo's, the earliest reservation you'll ever be able to find during NFL Combine week. Let's talk the Pittsburgh Steelers' first offseason move here. Donald Parham, 27 years old, out of Stenson University. I didn't look that one up. It says Stenson. I said, wow, that's a wild one. Has made his way to the NFL, has spent time with the Detroit Lions, the Denver Broncos last season, I believe the Raiders there for a quick second, and has spent his longest streak with the Los Angeles Chargers, appearing in a couple of games, spending about 2.5, 3 seasons with the team. Is a guy that on Friday we're talking about, is Mark Andrews an answer for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Can they go out and get a veteran to be the number 2 and bump everybody backwards? Well, their idea is much different than mine. Their idea was, let's go get a tight end 4 that can compete with Connor Hayward and come in here and maybe earn a roster spot in the summer. And while it's 6'7", the heads of Mount Washington and Donald Parham are going to stand tall getting off the Pittsburgh Steelers bus in August. And I think I'm okay with that. I like the move of, we're going to call him Donnie Parham. I don't know if he goes by Donnie, but Donnie flows off the tongue much better on an All Steelers Talk podcast. Donnie Parham, I kind of like the move. I don't think it adds almost any upside to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It doesn't move the needle at all, but it does give them competition for Connor Hayward, which I think is valuable. And I think at the same time, if you were going to keep 4 tight ends, which the Steelers did last year, and a tight end is a young, developing quarterback's best friend, and if you are in the belief that it will be Justin Fields this season, then that is a good thing. To go out there and get a 4th that is under the age of 30, that can block and catch a football, that hopefully does a little bit more than Michael Pruitt did, which, You know, no disrespect to Michael Pruitt for fourth tight end. He did a lot last season. I hope Donald Parham does a little bit less, but in a more productive way. Your thoughts when they inked good old Donnie Parham on Friday afternoon?
And then my first thought was, I can't believe this is the first signing of the offseason, because I was expecting, as everybody else was, the first thing you take care of is the quarterback. But as we stand now, third string tight end is the first thing you take care of if you're on the south side of Pittsburgh. But no, what I look at this as is the Washington's knee contingency, because for some reason, the Pittsburgh Steelers used Darnell Washington less and less and less as the season went on. And we all understand he's a big dude. He's had his injury issues in the past. Maybe they were just a little wary of using him up way too much in his second year. Well, you go out and you get Donald Parham. He is in the similar mold of Darnell Washington, not to mention the fact that he's coming off a career year. He had more yards last year with the LA Chargers than Darnell Washington had with the Steelers, not to mention he had 4 touchdowns to Darnell's 1 last year. So this to me is just another big receiving option that hopefully, if the same thing occurs and if Darnell Washington becomes getting used less and less and less throughout the season, they have another big tight end, big receiving option behind him, because it wasn't Pruitt, it wasn't Hayward. Maybe it'll be Parham this year.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not opposed to another big body. I'm not opposed to a guy who could come in here and play both sides of a tight end position. I think that's very valuable. Again, like, I don't expect Donald Parham to see the field much, but like you said, he's insurance to whatever happens to Darnell Washington and whatever the Steelers' game plan is for Darnell Washington, because whether we want it to be or not, it seems to fade every single season when we get excited and then it dies down. And if that's going to be the case, if that's going to be a continuous loop, okay, good. Have a backup. That backup is now Donald Parham. I expect them to be done at the tight end position, outside of like other guys that we don't know who sign very cheap, come in here and hope to make a practice squad spot deals. And besides that, it'll be nothing at the tight end position. They'll roll into it. I'm okay. I really am. I'm okay with the Steelers tight end position looking like Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, Connor Hayward, and Donald Parham, with some competition at the bottom of that to say, hey, we're going to keep 3. Are we going to keep 4? Who knows? We'll find out. I don't think it's a terrible move. What's next is many things. The Steelers will head to the NFL Combine. They obviously have to make a quarterback decision. To be very honest with you, expect that to heat up a lot within the coming days, because there will be so much conversation down in Indianapolis. You got to remember, when was the Justin Fields to the Steelers thing starting to emerge a year ago? Indianapolis, because the Steelers said, hey, you know what? Omar's sitting right there. Brian Pools or Ryan Pools, whatever his name is. Pools, thank you, is sitting right there. Now let's have a little conversation, discuss a little quarterback trade in the making. I think that happens again this week with Omar Khan and Justin Fields' agent. That's what I expect to go down. But in the meantime, everybody's speculating about possible trades and things that will happen. And to be very honest with you, while I think the next step is the NFL Combine, then it will go quarterback decisions, then it will go free agency. In the midst of that, there will be a lot of conversation about guys that will leave the Pittsburgh Steelers. You will have to look at guys like Larry O, Cole Holcomb, potentially Isaac Seumalo, depending on how you play or see the offensive line, which Jerry Dulac says James Daniels, there's no chance he's coming back to the Pittsburgh. They're done with James Daniels, which has got to feel good for both Isaac and Mason McCormick. And then the possible trade of George Pickens. I wrote yesterday that I believe George Pickens could go for a first-round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that's very worth it. If you are the Pittsburgh Steelers, depending on how free agency plays out, I think you can make the move during free agency to say, we'll give up George right now. We'll get a first-round pick. We'll go sign a Darius Slayton and another name, or we'll trade for a Cooper Kupp and be in a pretty good situation heading into 2025, because we have 2 first-round picks. You could go get Emeka Ibuka. You could go get Burden. You could go get Matthew Golden. I mean, I'm less high on both of those names compared to Ibuka, but I think all the possibilities are on the table. NFL.com's Adam Rank believes that the Green Bay Packers could be hunting for George Pickens this offseason. I think it makes a lot of sense. Go get a superstar wide receiver for Jordan Love. He's got some really good wide receivers in Christian Watson and Wicks and Romeo Dobbs. But to be honest with you, he doesn't have a star wide receiver. Christian Watkins is probably the closest name you get there, but he's injured most of the time. And because of that, you can't really rely on him to be the guy. I wouldn't be surprised if the Green Bay Packers are saying, screw it. We don't have many holes. We have a pretty crappy draft pick. Maybe we'll give up a first-round pick for George Pickens. They're in the sweet spot, because that's where I look at this. Is you look back and people will say, oh, it was 3 years ago, it was 2 years ago, whatever. Wide receivers still go for pretty high-end talent, okay? Stephon Diggs went for a second-round pick a year ago. He was 30 years old and had 1 year left on an expensive contract that he did not sign an extension for, which means that he was 30 years old on a one-year deal and went for a second-round pick. George Pickens is 23 years old. He's got a $3 million cap hit in 2025. You are going to extend him, whoever you are, most likely. And yeah, I think you could give it first. I mean, you go back 3 years, Marquise Brown went for a first. A.J. Brown went for a first. Tyreek Hill went for a first, a second, and I think 2 fourths in that draft class. That's just what happens. You have wide receivers that are talented, and teams are going to look at them. On top of that, this is not a very explosive, big name. There are no the Malik Neighbors or the Marvin Harrisons or the Brian Thomases in this draft class. So teams will be a little bit more desperate to make a move. I can see the Green Bay Packers saying, screw it. You know, Aaron Rodgers is gone. We actually go after wide receivers now. George Pickens could be the name. Again, I think that 15 to 32 spot is the sweet spot. That back half of the first round is where I believe the Steelers could get a first-round pick for George Pickens, and I think the Packers make a little bit of sense here. Any thoughts?
Yeah, the one thing that worries me about that is the wide receivers that you have in the draft and the wide receivers that you have in free agency. If you trade away George Pickens, the number one receiver is not on the roster. I don't think you're going to get, even as much as I like Emeka Egbuka, I don't think he's ready to be a number one wide receiver this year. No. So you don't get him in the draft, and you're probably not going to get him in free agency unless you go out and get a Chris Godwin. But even him, he's been a habitual number two his entire career. Is he ready to step out of the shadow? We talked for a long time about T. Higgins, and there even was a little bit of doubt with him of, well, whenever he is the guy, can he continue to perform? Can he continue to elevate? So you're not going to replace George Pickens this year. Are you okay with that? Are you essentially okay with saying we are going to become the Packers? Because what the Packers are right now is probably the best collection of number two wide receivers in the National Football League. That was exactly what your plan would be if you trade George Pickens, because Pickens is going to go up and be a top 3 receiver in Green Bay. If he goes there, that's what's going to happen. And you're going to have to deal with the noise of that if you're Pittsburgh. But if you're in the Steelers' shoes, once you do that, you 100% are taking wide receiver in the first round, whether it be Egbuka or Burden or Golden. That's a guy that could, I think, at his rookie ceiling, become a number 2. Roman Wilson could become a number 2. Calvin Austin could become a number 2. And maybe you add somebody in free agency, but at best, they're likely going to be at the level of a number 2. So that's my one concern is you went from we have a number 1 and no number 2 to and a couple number 3s to we have exclusively number 2s. And if you don't have that guy that can take the top off and take over a game, you're in a difficult position, especially in an AFC that is firepower among firepower among firepower.
I agree with that. So I'll ask the long-term reward. Is it worth it? Because your options in this case, in this instance, is essentially George Pickens for a season, because we're assuming George isn't going to get a deal. I find it very hard to believe George is going to get a deal. He might get franchise tagged next year, but I don't think it's more than that. You could trade George, draft a wide receiver, possibly sign a Chris Godwin or Darius Slayton, or make a move for a Cooper Kupp and have that too. Hope that whoever you draft in the first round is great, but also have another first round pick to get a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman or something like that, where you build a little bit more for the future? Are you, obviously you're giving up the now for the later, but would you be comfortable with that?
I would be open to that simply because of the things that I talked with you about last week, is that I don't see this team anywhere close to a Super Bowl. I barely see this team as a playoff contender going into next year. So if you're sacrificing the now for a little bit of a higher ceiling in 2026 or 2027, I'm open to that. But again, it has to be the first. It can't be anything less than that for George Pickens. So yeah, obviously if it's the first round pick, I'm open to it. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, hey, if we can walk away with Walter Nolan and Matthew Golden and not have to give up anything to move up to those spots, I think you're pretty happy with that result. So if it's a first, then yeah, I'm open to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think a first round pick is where I sit, and I think it's very obtainable. I maybe not very, but I do think it's obtainable. I think if there's real interest in George Pickens, a first round pick is what I'm setting that bar at. I'm not taking a second for George Pickens. I'm not feeling comfortable with it. It's not worth it. A second round pick, awesome. In a loaded draft class, in last year's draft class, cool. I'd take a second and feel very okay with going to get a wide receiver. In this year's draft class, I'm not feeling that comfortable. I'm not going to get a Darius Slayton and then sitting around for a Trey Harris, because I don't know if Trey Harris is going to turn out to be anything good. Trey Harris looks great, but to be honest, he kind of gives me like Jonathan Mingo vibes, where it's like, okay, like a big-bodied physical guy who has some pretty good speed and is probably going to impress at the NFL Combine. Probably some upside there. Also, the possibility that he turns out to be a dud. I just think that's there. I think that's what this draft class is. I think you could get a first for George. Again, there's a long way to go here, but I do think you're going to be able to, if a team is desperate enough, get a first for George. Again, back half of the first, you're not getting a top 10 pick for George Pickens, but you can get a Packers pick. You can get a Chargers pick for George Pickens to feel it's a Buffalo pick for George Pickens to say, you know what? Why not? What would those teams get at the bottom of the half? Nothing compared to George Pickens. And the only reason the Steelers would give him up is because they understand that they have to build for the future, and they are not hunting the right now. And George is a right now commodity. The Bills need a right now. The Packers need a right now. The Chargers need a right now. The Steelers also need a right now, but they need a quarterback. And they need a defense, and they need a couple of wide receivers in a year from now as much as they need a wide receiver this season. And I think that the Steelers are looking to get rid of some noise. George is obviously the noise, and it could go down. It could, again, long ways away. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, like 2 weeks, but I think it is a possibility. All right, let's talk NFL Combine and a little NFL draft here before I head to Indianapolis. I do hit the road today. The Steelers are going to talk to, I believe, 50 prospects. They have 50 formal meetings, something like that. I could get that number wrong, but I've always believed it's 50 formal meetings with players. I mean, you could say that's a ton. It's not. It's really not. It limits you to a very small number of these guys who are at the NFL Combine. And they're gonna have some names to dive through and some names to cut out of the equation here. They're also gonna situate it to where we're not gonna meet with the pick guy because we could just go have lunch over there and coincidentally have him walk in at the same time and sit down at the same cafeteria table as us, and maybe we have a conversation like they did with Kenny Pickett. But it is going to give a lot away. I got 5 names that Pittsburgh Steelers fans should be watching, but first, I want to give you guys my draft prediction right now. I have spoken to people. I have dived a little bit more and more as the day goes on into film of these guys. And to be honest, I went from Ben Morrison is my guy. Maybe the Steelers make an offensive splash and go Ashton Genty. How could you pass up Gray Zabel if he's there, 21, because he's climbing fast? I mean, even names like Will Johnson have somehow slid to the Pittsburgh Steelers in recent mock drafts. I've gone all over the board, and what I have found is that the Pittsburgh Steelers have an opportunity to juice up the defensive line more than any other position in this draft class. And this is not a draft to sit around and say, we need a quarterback, so we're going to go get a quarterback. We need a running back, so we're going to get a running back. We need a wide receiver, so we're going to go get a wide receiver. No, this is a draft to say we need young defensive linemen. Art Rooney made that very clear. Mike Tomlin made that very clear. I'm sure when I speak to Omar Khan tomorrow, he's going to make that very clear that they need young defensive linemen. And this draft class is loaded with them. Loaded. I'm talking to the gills. Maxed out. It is the best position in the NFL draft by far. And that includes names that will be there at 21. I have one guy in the first round that I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers will select come April 27th. And then I have one guy in the second round that I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers will select come April 28th. And they play the same position somewhat, and they are complete game changers to where the Steelers are headed in the right way. Here they are. With the first round pick 21 in the 2025 NFL draft, I'm feeling pretty confident in Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss being the Pittsburgh Steelers selection. I look at Walter Nolan as, he's the self-proclaimed next Aaron Donald. And to be honest with you, that's a giant shoe to fill. Maybe too big, maybe impossible to fill, but I'm taking a chance on him. I think this dude's a stud. His transition from Texas A&M to Ole Miss was seamless, and his ability to make massive plays at Ole Miss is exactly what the Steelers need. I believe he had 6.5 sacks his final season at Ole Miss, 14 tackles for loss, something like that. This is a guy that he is a defensive tackle in all settings. He can replace Larry Ogunjobi. He is an instant starter and a dude that you look at the names who have come out of the draft in recent years, who have made massive impacts. Jared Verse out of LA is the one that stands out to everybody because of what he did in the playoffs this past season. I think that Walter Nolan has that impact. He sits there in my head right below a Kenneth Grant, who, you take either one of those Michigan guys, they are phenomenal. Phenomenal. I think Walter Nolan is just a small notch below that. Obviously, Kenneth Grant would be a huge landing for the Steelers, but I am all in on Walter Nolan. I think he is a phenomenal football player and has insane upside. He's a day one starter. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you don't even have to make him a day one starter because you have Cam Hayward. You have this guy named Cam Hayward who's going to start in front of him while you move Keanu Benton over. Maybe you keep Keanu Benton where he is. But to be honest, I'd move Keanu over one. I would start him and Cam Hayward. Walter Nolan be coming off the bench. And this next name would be starting a nose tackle. Because in the second round, again, where we sit here right now, I think the Steelers are going to double dip. And I'm not crazy to say this. I promise you I'm not. You could sit here and say, and everybody could sit here and say, they need a running back. They need this. They need that. I agree. And if the board does not fall the way that they believe it will fall, I understand that. They could make an immediate change. Running back is certainly on the list. I don't think a second round wide receiver is that high for the Steelers, to be honest. I think they'd wait till the third or the fourth. I look at the second round and say, if Darius Alexander's there out of Toledo, he is the guy. He's 6'4" or something, 320 pounds on a light day. And he is just, that's what he is. He is a shove the helmet on, barely fits, stand in the middle of the field, and nobody's getting by up the middle type of football player. And that is what the Steelers need. They need a nose tackle. They've needed a nose tackle. You want to stop the run? You go get Darius Alexander. I have a feeling he's going to improve and really move up the draft board. But if he does not, the Steelers would luck out so much double dipping at defensive tackle in this one. Those are my two names. I truly believe if the draft happened today and the board fell the way the Steelers would love it to fall, they would get Walter Nolan in the first round and they would double dip with Darius Alexander in the second, and their defensive line would be fixed. They'd be good to go. And you want to know what everybody will say, you're crazy. What are you talking about? You want to know what the Steelers live and die on? That defensive front. They could care less if Dante Jackson's playing corner as long as the guys up front aren't letting anybody get by and they're sacking the quarterback. That's how they've won Super Bowls in the past. That's how they'll try to win them in the future. Walter Nolan and Darius Alexander, if it happened today, would be my selections for the Steelers. And they are my predictions for the Steelers as we stand here today. Was going to put out a mock draft today. Maybe I'll put one out tomorrow. Those are my names. Your thoughts?
The old Andy Weidl special. If that is indeed the way they go, 5 of the 6 first and second round picks that the Steelers have made since Weidl Khan took over are big men, right? Broderick Jones in 2023, then they took Joey Porter Jr. But then you look at last year and it's Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier. And then you'd go to the defensive side and build it from the big men. They just watched the team in the same state do that and win a Super Bowl.
Yep.
The belief and the thought process is sound. So if they end up doing that, it's not what I expected. It's not what a lot of people expected. And everybody wants to see them draft the next superstar that's going to score touchdowns and put up yards and be in conversations for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Nobody put Zach Frazier in conversation for Offensive Rookie of the Year, but guess what? He was probably one of the best rookies in the NFL last year. Andy Weidl, Omar Khan, they have told you time and time again, we're investing in the big boys. If they did that, it would go right along the line of their first 2 NFL drafts. And honestly, it's hard to refute. You look at the back end of that, the Steelers have always been built from the front to the back on the defensive side of the football. They've always said every year, what do they need to do first? We need to stop the run. We need to stop the run. Yeah, rushing the quarterback's great. Blitzburg, whatever. We need to stop the run. That's important. And if you go out and get these 2 guys, that's just accentuating the fact that this front office values the big guys up front. They've done it on the offensive side for their first 2 drafts. That would be them taking a very hard look and a very hard stance saying we need to now protect the big guys and build the big guys on the defensive, the defensive side of the ball.
Yep, I agree. You could look at their offseason as a whole and say they are laying out a lot of ideas and a lot of hints at where they're going. The running back room is open, but we're obviously interested in Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. All right, great. Chances are they're bringing one back, and they will bump running back down the list. Wide receiver, there is a job opening, and they are trying to make a splash, but they're not going to wait around for the NFL draft to make that splash. That room's going to be filled. It's not going to be filled to capacity. There's going to be room for another addition, but that room it's going to have enough names to say you could pass on a first-round wide receiver, and the Steelers almost always pass on a first-round wide receiver. Just like you said, they watched it. They sat there and watched that Super Bowl, and they thought the same thing everybody else did. Wow, we were wrong. We were all wrong. You don't beat the Chiefs by scoring 60 points. You beat the Chiefs by beating Patrick Mahomes, by literally beating Patrick Mahomes. And that's what they did. And the Steelers are looking at it going, all right, well, if that's what we want to do, we have the formula. We have the pieces in TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig and Keanu Benton. Now it's time to finish it off, And that's the thing is you look at the Steelers have made guys, and this is no disrespect to any of these guys. Bryant McFadden, William Gay, at a time, Ross Cockrell, who I bring up constantly on this show. They have made Patrick Peterson and Akella Witherspoon, and you name it, they've done it. Look pretty okay with solid pass rush to make sure that quarterbacks do not have the time to get a ball out clean and make it efficient. And I think that's what's coming this season is a total reshape. No more Band-Aids. Let's find the next Stephon Tuitt, Javon Hargraves, Cam Hayward, and you could do that with Darius Alexander, Walter Nolan, and Keanu Benton. I think it's happening. With that said, we'll finish off our agenda with this one. 5 names that you guys, Steelers fans, should 100% be locked in on this week at the NFL Combine. Indianapolis is going to be great. I personally think that you have to combine both their testing and their interview status with the Steelers to determine just what your takeaway is from the Combine. If a guy runs fast and looks really good, awesome. But if he doesn't meet with the Pittsburgh Steelers, you got to take that into consideration. You can't just look at guys and say, Jackson Dart looked phenomenal, but he didn't say a word to Mike Tomlin all week. That's not a good indication he's on the Steelers' radar. These are not 5 names that I think are going to perform super well. These are not 5 names that I think are superstars in the making. These are 5 names that if I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I'm locked in on because I think they are actual targets for the Pittsburgh Steelers and names that they will consider very highly in this NFL draft. We'll start with number 5. That is good old Caleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa. The Steelers are going to look at him and say, this dude meets everything we're looking for. He's powerful, he's explosive, and he's damn fast. I believe that Iowa, I saw something the other day, and again, it was just a clip on Twitter, so I don't know how truthful this is, but it looked legit that Iowa's GPS tracked him at 22 miles per hour during the season. That's ridiculous for a guy who's like 220, 230. That's wild fast. The Steelers are going to be into Caleb Johnson. They're going to be real into a running back. Caleb Johnson fits that mold of like a second, maybe inches his way into the 3rd round running back, depending on how things fall. And that is exactly where the Steelers are going to be looking. I believe Caleb Johnson is 100% on the Steelers list. He is a name to watch for the Steelers. Number 4 is a name we just talked about, Darius Alexander. They loved him at the Senior Bowl. I would imagine they meet with him again, and how he tests will determine not just if the Steelers have interest, but if the rest of the NFL has interest. If Darius Alexander blows the top off of Indianapolis and Lucas Oil Stadium erupts over a 330-pound dude running a 4.5, chances are he's going in the 1st round. And the Steelers aren't going to get an opportunity to even sniff the chance of Darius Alexander. So I'm all eyes on the Toledo nose tackle. Number 3 is a 2-parter, and that's the Ohio State twins, the running backs in the making, Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson. I think both of them are studs. The Steelers are obviously going to go to Columbus. They're going to be all in on both of these guys. It depends on where they fall. I've seen mock drafts where Henderson goes in the 1st round before anybody but Genty. I don't know what the board is going to shape up to be, but I do know the Steelers are going to be looking at those 3 names. Caleb Johnson, Judkins, Henderson will be the 3 names that the Steelers say, those are realistic targets for us. Let's go get those realistic targets. Omarion Hampton will be on their list as well, but they don't typically go to North Carolina, and I have a hard time believing that they're going to be all in on a guy that's probably going to go before their 2nd round pick. I just don't think that's going to be realistic. Sometimes they do take that into consideration. They don't speak with the Marvin Harrisons or the Malik Neighbors or the whoever's because they only have a certain number of interviews, and they're saying, yeah, all right, this guy's going to be gone before we get a chance to really look at him. And that plays a role a number of times. Number 2 on this list is my 1st round pick for the Steelers, Walter Nolan. Again, he's are you going to go before Kenneth Grant? Are you going to go after Kenneth Grant? How's the board going to shake up because of what you're doing? How much attention and traction are you going to build at Lucas Oil and in Indianapolis? That's what this week is. This is we see the board here, but the board ain't done. The board has so much shaking and turning to do over the next couple of weeks, and this is where it starts. And it's a massive shakeup between today and Sunday morning when everybody leaves Indy. So Walter Nolan is number 2, and number 1 is Emeka Egbuka, because he's in the same boat. Everybody expects this guy to be a late 1st round pick until he goes to Indy and just knocks everybody's socks off. And all of a sudden, he's a top 15 pick. All of a sudden, there's consideration that he's the 1st wide receiver off the board, and somebody's going to take a chance on him early in the 1st round. And you could say that doesn't happen. It happens all the time. All the time. Teams say, oh, we'll take this wide receiver. And everybody goes, what? I didn't see that coming. That could be Emeka Egbuka this year. It could easily be Emeka Egbuka. I mean, you look at guys going into the NFL Combine last year, or 2 years ago, I guess. You want to know who the name was that outside of a quarterback, I was like, man, this guy is perfect for the Steelers and might be there at 20? Devin Witherspoon out of Seattle or out of Illinois. And you want to know where he ended up? As the 6th pick in the NFL draft because of what happened in Indianapolis. And I just think Emeka Egbuka's got that upside. So I'm all eyes on him. Does he explode? Who does he meet with? That is a massive conversation there. Who has eyes on Emeka Egbuka, and are the Steelers one of them? That is everybody I'm looking at. Caleb Johnson, Darius Alexander, the Ohio State backs, Walter Nolan, Emeka Egbuka. That's my top 5 names to watch as a Steelers fan this week at the Combine. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the one major takeaway and the one name that stands out to me there is Caleb Johnson, right? The NFL draft process is a very long, very winding road, and you talk about certain players and fall in love with certain players for a couple weeks, and then somebody else pops up, and you got to talk about them, and how good would they look in black and gold? But we already know Caleb Johnson looks great in black and gold, and that was the first name that everybody started looking at and saying, listen, this guy is a prototypical Steelers running back. And he was very, very good at the University of Iowa. But you know what else happened? Ohio State went on and won the longest ever, biggest ever, greatest ever, most watched ever college football playoff on the backs of Travion Henderson, of Quinshon Judkins, and of Emeka Egbuka. And all of a sudden, everybody in Pittsburgh said, would you look at that? Doesn't hurt that Cam Hayward is definitely, pushing Ohio State pride all the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's as simple as going back to your first thought. And I think my first thought, and a lot of other people in Pittsburgh's first thought, was the running back position looks like Caleb Johnson would be a perfect fit in the city of Pittsburgh. Like I mentioned, the colors fit, the style fits, the everything fits for Caleb Johnson. So that is a name that started at the top of my radar, has kind of fallen off a little bit. But now that we're back at the Combine, that's a name that 100%, you put him at number 5. I think he's a little bit higher on my list, and not to take anything off of some of these other guys, but I think Caleb Johnson's a name that we've forgotten about a little too much over the last couple of weeks.
I agree. I agree. I like that. I like that analysis. I look at Caleb Johnson as, man, dude, if there's some possible way that he slides to the 3rd round, the Steelers are crazy not to make a move and go get him. They're just nuts. Go make a move. Go give up a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick, go give up all your 7ths. Who cares? Move up in the 3rd round. Go get Caleb Johnson. I agree. I think he's got so much upside. There are running backs in some draft classes that you watch. The Najee Harris draft class is a great example, where you're looking at these middle round guys and going, man, they could be good. They could be good. This is a draft class where you are pretty certain that at least 5 of these guys are going to be stars. Like stars, and that this is the draft class where the running back position has caught up, where the NFL has too many good running backs. The running back position is too devalued to where you look at these guys and you go, man, dude, if you're like, you could look at free agency and that's great. And you're going to get some names out there, but there aren't the big free agents because everybody's on a team. Last year, the Josh Jacobs, the Saquons, the Christians, the everybody got signed. There were all these teams. The Joe Mixons got traded. Everybody was out there. Okay, nobody was waiting around for this running back class. The Steelers were, and hopefully they take advantage of it. And I believe that they're gonna. I believe they're gonna.
Look at who is the top running back available right now if he gets to free agency. It's Najee Harris. And the Steelers elected a year ago to say, we're not extending him because that running back class could be really good. And we could get a improvement on who the top free agent is going to be. If it all works out for them, it looks great. If it doesn't, and they don't get one of these running backs, then, rightfully so. There's going to be a lot of people angry at the bosses there in Southside.
I agree, but I even think that if you go below Caleb Johnson, there are some names that you're looking at going, it's okay.
I don't know if it's RJ Harvey, but there are some names.
Yeah, you're going deep before you get to RJ Harvey, but you could go Ollie Gordon. You could go what's his name out of Miami. There are some names that I think are sitting there in that 3rd, 4th round going, that ain't a bad running back. That ain't a bad running back. So we'll see what happens. All right, that's everything on my agenda today. We're going to finish off the show the same way we do every single day. We're going to answer all of your questions, so make sure you toss them in the chat. We'll get to all of them before we head out of here. Nick, what do we got?
Let's kick things off with Egyptian Roughneck. Appreciate you as always. Says, here's a good start bench cut. Ray Lewis, Warren Sapp, and Aaron Donald.
Oh, this is a very good one, actually. This is a very good one. This one might be the most difficult one we've had to date. I'm going, Steelers fans are going to hate this, but you got to start Ray Lewis. right? Like just out of pure, like a little bit of fear, I would say. Maybe Ray Lewis. But to be honest, there's an argument for Aaron Donald, a pretty strong one, pretty ginormous argument for Aaron Donald. Okay, you know what? Out of respect to Walter Nolan, we're gonna start Aaron Donald. Okay, we're gonna bench Ray Lewis, which I think is a good number 2 there, and then I'm gonna cut Warren Sapp. But cutting Warren Sapp is the dumbest decision you could ever make, and that's where I stand. That's the hardest one we've had.
We've done a lot of these start bench cuts over the last couple of weeks, which we absolutely love when you guys throw them in. But the one problem with these is you're always going to be on camera, on recording, saying that you would cut usually a Hall of Famer, greatest of all time level player. So it's fun, but it is a little bit.
Yeah, we always just look like idiots. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody's going to say you're cutting Warren Sapp, which sounds in a vacuum very ridiculous. But again, that's the fun of these start bench cuts. So keep them coming, guys. Love it.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's go to Michael. Appreciate you as well. Says used Spotrack's cap simulator after cuts, restructures, and extensions, most of which was talked about on this very show. I was able to have $100 million in space. Is that feasible?
Yeah, I think it's actually very obtainable for the Steelers. And that's where we at. I mean, I did it, I believe, was it Friday? Friday, I dove into what the cap situation was and where the Steelers could make some adjustments and what I would do with the $60 million that they have free right now. And I think I got to 66, and then that was without anything. The Steelers would spend 66, and I felt comfortable with that number. And then you could move on from Larry O. You can restructure Alex Highsmith, Minka, probably Cam Hayward. And you can do stuff like extend TJ, which is going to lower his cap hit as well. I agree. I think that's all there. It's all very feasible. 100 million right around there is usually what the Steelers end up getting to. And I would believe that's on the market this year as well. Yes.
We got a couple of questions from Maddie. First and foremost, good morning, guys. What do you think are the sleepers in this year's draft?
Oh, that's a really good question. We'll go like early sleepers. I think Ben Morrison's a big sleeper in this draft, but I also think Revin Chevelle out of East Carolina is also a big sleeper in this draft that teams are going to look at and say, this cornerback class isn't that great. This cornerback class is fantastic. Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky Hairston out of Kentucky, whatever his last name is also a big upside type of talent at the cornerback position. You go running back. I mean, personally, I think Ollie Gordon has Chuba Hubbard upside, and people are just ignoring it. And I get it that they went to the same school, and that's why I'm making that comparison. But I just look at them and just say, like, people overlooked Hubbard coming into the NFL, and I think Ollie Gordon has that same kind of upside. I think, to be honest, Darius Alexander is a top 25 player in this draft and is going to most likely go in the second round. And I'll toss quarterback your way too. I think Will Howard's a sleeper in this draft as well. I think Will Howard's got starting potential in a couple of years in the NFL, and some team's going to get a hold of that. And 3 years down the road, he's going to be the next guy, the next Dak Prescott or whoever that people are talking about going, oh, well, they didn't get him in the first round. It's like, yeah, I know. Those would be a couple of my names to start with. I'm excited to see more of them down here, though, in Indy.
Let's go to Maddie's second question here. Do you think money is everything in the NFL, or does familiarity and a sense of stability play a bigger role than people think?
Yeah, I think the NFL has screwed themselves on that one. I do think money is everything in the NFL. It will always talk more than anything else. And that's just simply because the NFL has made this such a business that there is no loyalty. I mean, there's much more loyalty in the NFL than there are in many other sports, but there is very little loyalty in the NFL. Guys you will get the TJ Watts, obviously, but the TJ Watts know they're going to be here forever. And that's known for things. You get the Cam Haywards, that's a very rare case. Most times you're going to get, I'm looking for the money. I'm looking to get paid, and I'm looking to keep things together. I think the quarterback position is different than any other position, but when it comes to a regular position outside of quarterback, I do think money plays almost everything in most scenarios.
Yeah, I always say it's two things when somebody goes to free agency. It is money and opportunity. And if you're
Yeah.
somebody like TJ Watt, you can afford to have loyalty because you're going to get the money in Pittsburgh and
Yep.
you're going to get the opportunity because who the heck are they going to play over top of you? Those are the two big things I think every single free agent wrestles with. And it's if you are good enough and you can get both, then great. And that's why you see guys like Justin Jefferson get the contracts that they get. But a lot of these guys, Najee Harris, he has to weigh that money versus opportunity. A guy like Justin Fields, especially, has to weigh that. He might get more money to go somewhere else, but he's going to get a better opportunity than he's going to get in Pittsburgh. That's a conversation that he has to have and his agent has to have. But fortunately, we don't. Let's go to Egyptian Roughneck. Appreciate you again. Says last one for me: Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, Marshawn Lynch.
Oh, I mean, this one, look at Beast Mode was awesome. I've met Beast Mode once. He lives up to all the hype. He really does. It's Barry Sanders. It's right in that order. Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, Marshawn Lynch. That's start bench cut. That one's Barry's the GOAT, man. Him and Lawrence Taylor are literally the only true GOATs to ever play the NFL.
Let's go to Pittsburgh Hornets, who says, so they signed a tight end first. Do you think that means they're going to try to get a new quarterback in the draft or via a trade?
No, no, I don't think so. I believe that nothing changed. This was just a veteran who was out there that the Steelers said, let's take care of this now. I would imagine the Steelers had their eyes on Donald Parham, like, prior to this season, and they just said, all right, he's available, let's negotiate with him and sign him to a very cheap deal, and that was able to happen. Parham's looking for a place to call home as early as possible before the money starts moving around, and that's what I look at this as. Is Parham knew that if he went to free agency, his chances of getting signed were significantly less, or at least getting signed to a real contract where he has a real opportunity to play this season were significantly less. And the Steelers knew they had an opening and said, this guy's 27, massive, fits what we're looking for. Let's give him a shot. That's all I think happened.
Let's go to Potatoes Salad, who says, my mom is a Chargers fan, so I remember when I first saw Donnie. I like this addition for the red zone, but are either of you worried that this will take reps away from already underutilized players like Pat and Darnell?
I mean, yeah, you do have to always worry about that in Pittsburgh. For some reason, they love to just split the tight end reps up. But no, where we sit here right now, I still see Pat as like their guy, and I still see Darnell as their number two. And I think Parham's a guy to come in here and compete with Connor Hayward and see what he can do. But no, I'm where we stand right now. I'm not worried about that. When we get to training camp and we realize that we should be worried about that, I will be.
Let's jump down to Justin Gordon, who wants to know all of your security questions, Noah. Says, what's up, fellas? Tapping in from West Adams, Los Angeles. Says, Noah, what is your official job title? Who pays you? And what is the set schedule of this show?
Oh, man, dude. Those are a lot
of security questions.
That's a lot of questions. We'll stick with this show alone. My official job title is, I guess, content creator, owner, I guess, of All Steelers Talk. I guess we would say that, or the host,
reporter in there.
Yeah, I mean, many things. I'm sticking to this show. We're gonna stick to the show only. I would say host. YouTube pays me. That's shout out to YouTube or Google, I guess, pays me. And the set schedule for the show during the off season is Monday and Friday at 9 a.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 4 p.m. During the season, we change Monday or Fridays to 4 p.m. to make sure we get injury updates and so on and so forth in there. But yeah, that's what it is. YouTube, shout out YouTube, man. Anybody could be their own boss on YouTube. It's a great time.
Let's jump to American Steel, who says start bench cut Mel, Rod, and Troy.
Oh, this is a phenomenal one. Thank you very much for this one. Actually, I'm starting Troy. Okay. I'm starting Troy Polamalu. I think he's, again, like Troy in my eyes is like, is the second face of the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise. Like that's how I view Troy Polamalu. You got to go Mel. You got to bench Mel. I mean, the NFL had to change the NFL because of Mel Blount was going to kill somebody, and he still probably could. Like, I see Mel, I don't know, 6 times a year at least. He shows up to a Steelers practice or an event or something, and every time he walks in a room, I'm like walking down the side, and it takes me a minute. Like, if he didn't always wear a cowboy hat, I would be like, man, dude, who's the guy they just brought in? Who's the dude they just signed? He looks just as terrifying today as he did when he played football. And then Rod Woodson, dude, is one of the greats, one of the greatest ever, to be honest. But just out of pure respect that the NFL had to change what they were doing for Mel Blount, you got to put him as your bench.
Let's go to Marlon, who says, wouldn't having all number 2s be a better room than one with Van Jefferson in it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I still think you're in a little bit of turmoil there, but I do think if your wide receiver room was Darius Slayton, a rookie, let's say Mecca Ibuka, Darius Slayton, Mecca Ibuka, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Ben Skoranek, you're in an okay spot. You're not. It could be much worse. The Steelers watched it happen last season. I mean, it's not great. Like Nick explained, it's not the best outcome. It's not even like top 2 outcomes, but it's definitely an upgrade from what they were dealing with last year. Definitely.
Yeah, the floor is definitely higher because he saw what happened when George went down. All of a sudden, the floor got real low. If you have all number 2s, the floor is just a little bit higher because if one goes down, you have somebody else to step in that role. But I will say the only other thing that concerns me a little bit about this is the Packers got through that because they have Jordan Love.
Yeah.
You could say what you want about Justin Fields. He has to make strides to get to where Jordan Love is currently. So that's the other thing. If you're trying to establish a quarterback without a pure number 1, it becomes a little bit harder.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's go to Broderick, who says, Nick and Noah, would you trade GP to the Kansas City Chiefs if they offer that first round pick?
I think that would be the one pick that it would have to be on the clock, and there would have to be a name that I want. That would be the only. This is not happening beforehand. You got 32's got to be on the board, or 31's got to be on the board. There's got to be a name out there that you're going, I cannot believe he's sitting there at 31, and then you make the move. There is not a premeditated trade. You would have to literally stare at it and go, okay, we have to do this. This is the best move for our franchise team or our franchise in the moment. That would be the only way I'd trade him to the Chiefs.
Let's jump back down to Egyptian Roughneck, who says, I like Russ, but to be honest, Justin Fields fits Arthur Smith's style so much better. How do you think a full season with Smith and Fields could turn us around?
I mean, I think it's got a lot of upside. I do. I like Justin Fields a lot. I think Justin Fields has some serious potential left in his tank. And we'll see what happens with Arthur Smith, but I'm not going to shut him down. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say Arthur Smith stinks. I think with Russell, that's the thing with Justin Fields on the field, Arthur Smith made a lot of really good adjustments, and he looked good those first 6 games to the point where you went, you came out looking terrible, but you went into halftime, things changed. And I think that opens the door. Like, that just means that they know how to develop and change and adjust. And, with Russ, my thing was there was nothing to adjust. There was nothing to change. You had one thing that you were able to do and you did it, and it didn't work, and it just kept getting worse. I think that's the thing with Justin. He's more dynamic. He's able to do more things, and Arthur Smith's able to adjust with that kind of quarterback.
Let's jump to Eddie the First, who says, hey, Noah, what's it like being a part of the media squad? When you first started, what was the vibe like being so young with established journalists, and did you have to earn your stripes?
Definitely had to earn my stripes. I still think I'm still earning my stripes. I look at myself as an unproven commodity in the world of the Pittsburgh Steelers media. Just because, like, you walked in there, my first day, the first person I ever spoke to was Jerry Dulac. Like, could you imagine? That's as big as it gets. And then Mike Pizzuta kicked me out of his seat 20 minutes in, and that was the scariest moment of my life. Caboli walks in, Joe Rutter, you got to give him his flowers as well. There's just so many greats. I mean, Labs, there's a ton of them out there. With Jim Wexel, I can't believe I forgot about Jim Wexel. That's on me.
Bouchette was still around when you started?
Oh, dude, Ed Bouchette was there my first couple of years. Yeah, dude, it was nuts. I felt you want to feel like a small child. You walk in there at 23 years old and you go, all right, we're here, we're part of this, and have no idea what you're doing, and then make a million mistakes along the way. Yeah, it was a good time. So I still think I'm earning my stripes, but it is cool. It feels good to it feels good to know I'm a little bit respected these days, and that I could kind of fit in with the group.
Let's go to Grayson, who says, "Hey, Nick and Noah, is Fiore's the best Pittsburgh pizza restaurant? I've been to the Berg for games over the years, and their pizza is some of the best I've had from anywhere."
You're not going to like my answer here. You're not. It's a no. It's I don't think Pittsburgh's got great pizza. I will say that, Fiore's it's not bad. Like, you could eat there and feel okay about their pizza. Like, it's not where I'm going. Like, are you going there? I'm not going there.
I'd go to Fiore's. It's not my top choice.
If someone really brought me there, I'm going there. Yeah. If somebody's like, "Do you want to go there?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" I'm going to Giovanni's downtown. I'm going Rockaway. Like, if I'm going anywhere, I'm making a 30-minute drive to wherever it is. I don't even know what part of Pittsburgh that is. I'm getting Rockaway. By the time I'm home, it's a little cold and it's worth it. I'm going to, there's another one that's right by Rockaway that's also really good. They share the same pizza recipe. That's also fantastic. But if I'm staying within the city, I'm going to Giovanni's. Where are you going there?
If I'm looking for a football pizza, I'm going to Milano's. I think that is the premier football pizza. It's the perfect mix of a little bit of grease, but also it's a nice firm pizza, crunchy, crispy. I like Milano's.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think Pittsburgh's filled with a bunch of those things. Like, it's just this is just pizza, which is fine. That's great. Sounds good. I'm telling you, man, I'm going to take everybody to Jessup one day. We're just going to eat some good pizza.
Let's jump to Justin Gordon. Appreciate you, Justin. Says, the Eagles nailed pick 1 in 2 years. Who's the perfect 1-2 for the Steelers on offense, on defense, or for one on each side of the ball?
I think the perfect 1-2 for the Steelers this season is Walter Nolan and Darius Alexander. I really do. I think that secures your defensive line for the future. That is exactly what the Steelers need right now. Build it. Build the defensive line. Like, hope that Patrick Queen takes a step forward. Hope that you have a dude in Peyton Wilson. Hope that you can find a corner next year. Hope that you could sign some wide receivers. Hope that you could draft a running back in the third. Like, hope for all these things. You have an opportunity to bulk your defensive line in a way that you have not been able to do so in 5 years. So, 2 defensive linemen. I think Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan are interchangeable depending on who's there, but I'm going 2 defensive linemen. My perfect 1-2 is Grant or Nolan, and then Alexander in the second round.
Let's go to Taylor, who says the combine is going to change a lot of things, but at this point, if Ibuka is gone by 21, is there another wide receiver you feel is worthy of taking in the first?
No, I don't. I passionately do not feel that way. I do not feel there. I'm not taking Burden in the first round. I'm not taking Matthew Golden in the first round. I'm not taking Trey Harris in the first round. I think you are reaching for a position that in a lot of other years, you will have some superstar talent. And that's the thing in my eyes, the wide receiver class this year is the quarterback class of Kenny Pickett's year. And you have an opportunity to draft your next Kenny Pickett at wide receiver if it's not Ibuka, or unless it's McMillan, but there's no chance he's falling 21. Or Travis Hunter, but there's no chance he's falling 21. Don't make a mistake. Go to a different position. I passionately feel there's only 2 wide receivers worth taking in the first round.
Let's jump down to Egyptian Roughneck, who says, last one for me today. I'm doing security at training camp this year. Hope to see you guys there.
You will definitely see me there. So make sure that you say what's good. I'll be there probably every day. Nick will probably make a trip up as well. Yeah. You see me, you point me out, man. Come right up to me. Say what's good. I'm the security dudes at the security guys at Latrobe are awesome. They're all a bunch of nice dudes. So you should enjoy yourself. It's a good time.
Let's jump to Grayson, who says, I have what I think is a really good scenario of start, bench, cut. So imagine all of these in their prime. Antonio Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Odell Beckham Jr.
I think that one's easy too. And I could be totally wrong here. All right. But Antonio Brown's your start. There's no question there, right? Like it's Antonio. Antonio Brown is a generational talent. Tyreek Hill and OBJ are phenomenal, but Antonio Brown was the best wide receiver in the NFL during his run. And if Julio Jones didn't exist, there'd be a pretty significant gap between him and number two. And that's no disrespect to names like AJ Green, who I think is one of the most underrated wide receivers to ever play in the NFL. But it was Antonio Brown. Bench is where it gets a little tricky, but I think I'm going Tyreek Hill. I think I'm going Tyreek. I think Tyreek holds up. I mean, him and OBJ are pretty much the same age. I think Tyreek he's got the longevity on him. Still looks phenomenal. And OBJ, I'd cut. My thing with OBJ is I think OBJ is great, but I think prime OBJ lasted 3 years, and that was it. You got great OBJ, and then it was just average OBJ.
Yep, perfect. Let's go to Lucid Music, who says, "Good morning, guys. Happy to finally catch a live. But if Pickens isn't going to be here this year, still, who would you realistically like to see step into that wide receiver one role?"
Realistically, Chris Godwin is a good name. I think Chris Godwin's got the most wide receiver. Like Chris Godwin's a wide receiver. He's been a wide receiver too his entire career, but he's played like a wide receiver one. He's got talent of a wide receiver one. He's older. You'd have to really it's got to be a bridge, but he's realistic. I think Darius Slayton has wide receiver one upside, but Cortland Sutton, wide receiver one upside, which isn't, the best wide receiver one upside you could have. He'd probably be in there too. Besides that, it'd be draft guys. Emeka Egbuka. I'd feel good about Emeka Egbuka, but I'm not pushing for Emeka Egbuka in the first round unless he's there. Those would probably be my three only realistic names.
All right, we got two more to get to. Let's start with James, who says, "This time last year, I asked you about Sutton. Now I think Calvin Austin is Zay Flowers if used correctly this year. Do you agree?"
I think Calvin Austin has more upside than outside of George Pickens than anybody on the offensive side of the ball in Pittsburgh. I think Zach Frazier could be the best center in the NFL. I think Troy Fautanu and Broderick Jones could be phenomenal as well. But I think Calvin Austin could be a wide receiver two and a deadly wide receiver two. I think that's there. So maybe I exaggerated by saying the most upside in the offensive side of the ball, but I still think his upside is massive. I could see Zay Flowers. Calvin Austin to me is a dude that if you find a way to make Calvin Austin phenomenal, it will pay off. You have to. He should definitely be included in their future plans, one way or another. He should not be bumped down the list any further than your starting slot wide receiver.
Let's finish it off with J Chaps Snacks Review, who says, "I was having this debate with my brother. Do you think Justin Fields is a top 15 quarterback in this league?"
Okay, we'd have to name them. Okay. So Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. These are not in order. They're just, these are immediate guys because we could put them in order. Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. I think Lamar and Josh Allen are interchangeable right there at 3 and 4. Who's 5? Who would be 5?
I mean, Jalen's got to be moving up there. I don't think
Jalen's 5,
but he's in the top 15 certainly.
I think I might put him 5. I think there's an argument to be made for 5. And again, it definitely in the top 15. So we don't have to push that argument. Jalen Hurts, Matthew Stafford's in there. Definitely. Goff's definitely in there.
Mayfield's
100%.
in there.
Baker Mayfield's in there. Tua's got to be in there. Which I think maybe bottom half of the 15, but I still think he's better than Justin Fields.
Herbert.
Justin Herbert's in there. Who we missing here? CJ Stroud has got to be in there. Jaden Daniels has got to be in there.
Then you're just about there.
Oh, Drake May has got to be in there.
Still, do you really
Drake May
him
is
that much higher than Justin with what's potential is left?
Yeah. I think Drake May could be. I think Drake May could be like the best quarterback in his draft class, and you know, and I think he's I think he's put that on display so far. But I agree with you. I think we could eliminate Drake May. He's not definitely a top 15 quarterback right now. Jaden Daniels is. You got to put Jaden Daniels. Yeah. Who am I missing? Oh, is Sam Darnold in there?
Again, I think you're on the same playing field as Justin Fields right now.
Okay. I like that argument. Brock Purdy.
Somebody said Bo Nix.
No.
Again, I think you're Brock Purdy, Bo Nix. I think we're getting to the realm of where Justin Fields is. And could he be top 15 with a full year? I believe that he could pass a lot of these names in a full year.
I think in a full,
clearly not the full half.
I think in a full year, definitely. Where we stand right now, I think he might be like just there, maybe just on the outside. But I think in a full year, I think you give Justin Fields an offense for a year, a good, capable offense for a year, and I mean a real team that's not the Bears, and he is a top 15 quarterback. I do agree with that.
Fair enough. That's a wrap for today then.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. I'm heading down to Indianapolis, so I will be there later this afternoon. We will be coming live from the NFL Combine every single day this week. So make sure to tune in. Check our YouTube page for all updates and si.com/NFL/Steelers for everything going on in Indianapolis. With that said, enjoy a beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.